You're listening to Chasing the Horizon, a podcast by, for, and about motorcyclists. This is episode 17, released on the 19th of March, 2018. Welcome to Chasing the Horizon, a podcast by, for, and about motorcyclists brought to you by the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America. Subscribe in iTunes, Google Play Music, or stream from their website at horizon.bmwmoa.org. My name is Wes Fleming. Thanks for joining us. I encourage you to visit our website at horizon.bmwmoa.org, where every episode gets its own post and a number of people write blog posts for us. It will benefit you this week to visit the site, as you can download an exclusive wallpaper image for your computer. Royal Enfield provided us with a spectacular photo taken by Brandon LaJoy. Find the post for this show, episode 17, and you'll find the link for the wallpaper. You'll also find links related to our guests, then the news bits, and the newsletter. For the first season, the newsletter and the website posts for each episode have basically been the same, but that's going to change in the summer hiatus and for season 2. Speaking of the news, right now is where I'd normally kick off with some news about Royal Enfield. But since my guest on this episode works for Royal Enfield and he has a lot to say about the company, I'll keep it brief and talk about something he didn't mention. Royal Enfield has expanded its presence in the Latin American market by opening a dealership in Buenos Aires, Argentina. The shop is the third for them in South America. The other two are in Brazil and Colombia. They'll be selling just 4 models: the Bullet, Classic, Continental GT, and the brand new Himalayan. Well, brand new in the Western Hemisphere. It's been out in India for a couple of years. I'm going to move on to a company I haven't had in the news segment for a while, and that's BMW. I'm not purposely toning down BMW news or anything like that, but I definitely want all the listeners out there to understand that even though a BMW club is producing this podcast, it's not meant to be a propaganda arm for the brand or the club. Well, maybe a little bit for the club. Like all of you, I love motorcycles, and I don't much care what badge or branding is on the side of the tank. At any rate, BMW fans in general, and adventure bike-loving GS riders specifically, are starting to talk more and more about an event coming up this summer called the GS Trophy. If you've never heard of the GS Trophy, it's kind of like the decathlon in the Summer Olympics, if the decathlon was done on giant dual-sport motorcycles and involved humping a bike that size over a fallen log. Riders form teams representing their country or region, and this year the competition will be held in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia. 5 Americans, 3 men, and 2 women are in it this year. The men make up Team USA, while the women are part of the 2 international 3-woman teams competing. BMW is preparing 114 Rally, and that's spelled Y-E at the end, variants of the flagship R1200 GS for the competition. The Rally version of the GS will have an exclusive paint scheme and a bunch of factory-installed options and accessories to highlight its rugged use case. BMW Motorrad's press release about the bike is understandably gushy, but it's hard to blame them because the bike is simply beautiful. Well, it's about as beautiful as a GS can be, and I say that as a GS owner myself. I'll include links to some photos in the show notes and the email newsletter so you can see this thing for yourself. In other BMW motorcycle news, they had a bit of a personnel shakeup. If you've seen an S1000RR or any of the R9T motorcycles, then you know the design work of Ola Stenegard. There are people I know in the industry that credit the R9T with putting BMW back in the international motorcycle spotlight a few years ago. Stenegard was instrumental in its design, and the news that he's left BMW to take a job at Indian has the rumor mills grinding away. Of course, some of the comments are funny, like fans of Indian's retro-style cruisers lamenting the onslaught of asymmetric headlights like those on the BMW Superbike. But in all seriousness, people who dig a little deeper see this as a clear indicator that Indian isn't going to be satisfied to stay in the cruiser market forever. If you've never ridden a Scout, you have no idea what a great motor that thing has, and how easy it would be for Indian to adapt the Scout's liquid-cooled V-twin to other slices of the motorcycle market. I don't have any inside information, but I think if the death of Victory means Polaris will never do anything with Indian but build heavyweight cruisers, then it was a shame that the forward-looking Victory got put down like a horse with a broken leg. Expect great things from Indian with Stenegard working in their design department. Before we head into the guest discussion for this episode, I'm going to touch on two famous Italian motorcycle riders. First up is Valentino Rossi, who signed a 2-year extension on his MotoGP contract with Yamaha. Rossi is now 39 years old, so this contract extension will make him the first MotoGP rider over 40 years old since Colin Edwards back in 2014. Rossi has won 56 MotoGP races on Yamaha motorcycles, not to mention 4 of his 7 championships. In case you didn't know, the 2018 MotoGP season kicked off in Qatar just this past weekend, but I'm not going to spoil it for you by telling you who won. It's also possible that I recorded this on Saturday night before they ran the race, so I don't know who won yet either. Finally, the motorcycle industry bid farewell to Ivano Beggio, who died last Monday. Beggio took over his father's bicycle company in 1968 and started making mopeds under the brand name Aprilia. Motocross bikes soon followed, and by the end of the 1970s, people were winning championships on Aprilias. Aprilia got into road racing in the 1980s in a big way, and by 2010 became the winningest brand in motorcycle racing history. They started making street bikes in numbers big enough to export in the 1990s, and fans of BMW will remember that the early F650 single-cylinder BMWs were sister bikes of the Aprilia Pegaso and sported a near-identical engine made by Aprilia for Rotax for BMW. Piaggio bought Aprilia in 2004, and Beggio went into semi-retirement as the honorary president of the company that only made bicycles when he took it over as a young man. Beggio was 73 years old, and the entire motorcycling world mourns his passing. This episode's discussion portion features a gentleman by the name of Rod Copes, who works with Royal Enfield in the United States. Rod, welcome to the show. It's good to have you.
Great. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, awesome. If you wouldn't mind, just take a second to introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. So again, the name is Rod Copes, and I am president of Royal Enfield North America. I've been in this role for just over 3.5 years. And then previously I had worked at Harley-Davidson for almost 20 years.
And so let's see, if you've been with Royal Enfield 3 years, Harley so you started working for Harley back in the 90s.
Yeah, I started with Harley-Davidson in 1993, coming out of business school. And so they hired me directly into a leadership development program where you rotated around for about 3 years into different functions and kind of at mid-management. And that really blossomed into an incredible career. I was very, very blessed at Harley. Really, was in all different parts of the company, from finance to kind of manufacturing and then onto the commercial side. So I'd managed a couple of the manufacturing plants and then became responsible for the Asia Pacific region. This was right during the Great Recession when the U.S. motorcycle market collapsed. And so we knew the focus on growth was going to be outside the U.S. So I had a great opportunity to kind of lead the strategy and the execution in Asia Pacific for Harley-Davidson, and then subsequently took on the other 2 international regions before also taking on North America. And when I left, I was responsible for global sales as well as global customer service, and left Harley, about a little over 5 years ago to kind of find the second half of my professional career, and bounced around and did some kind of what I would call more entrepreneurial kind of startup small company activity. And lo and behold, about 3.5 years ago, I found my way back into the motorcycle industry, kind of doing a startup for Royal Enfield, kind of the first wholly owned subsidiary company outside of India, where the parent company is located. So really, I was the first non-Indian employee of Royal Enfield, and started with myself in the basement, kind of developing the strategy and working with the leadership team in India, and then hired a small team, and we've been kind of moving forward, and we can get into more of the details of what we've done over the past few years. But that's kind of how we got started here at Royal Enfield in North America.
Well, it sounds like a really cool, American success story, bootstrapping up from nothing into something and continuing to grow it.
Yeah, it's, again, a great opportunity. Again, truly enjoyed working at Harley Davidson. Great brand, great company, and obviously, wonderful motorcycles. And but really wanted to try something different in the second half of my career, and I had gotten to know Royal Enfield quite well when I was with Harley Davidson. I helped Harley go into India back in 2009 and 10, and got to know Royal Enfield as a brand and a company, and specifically the CEO, Siddhartha Lal. So after I left Harley and was looking for new and exciting opportunities, Siddhartha called and suggest, hey, we've got a great opportunity. They were kind of at the time in their strategy where they really wanted to grow a little more globally and become a global motorcycle brand. And so one thing led to another. And again, to me, it was a chance of a lifetime to get back into motorcycling, but also to go work for a company and a brand that is the oldest motorcycle company that has been producing motorcycles continuously since 1901. And then to actually reintroduce this brand into North America, which has a great motorcycling heritage and culture, and to be able to do it as a startup by kind of creating my own team. And it's been an adventure, fun and exciting, but really enjoying my time and kind of continuing to grow my knowledge and understanding of the motorcycle industry in the U.S.
Yeah. So you, excuse me, you came to Harley straight out of business school. So when did you start riding motorcycles? Well,
everyone's got one of those stories, right? And unfortunately, that's really how most people in the United States learned, was in the backyard with your neighbor, right? So I wasn't fortunate enough to have a small dirt bike, but my neighbor did. And so that's how I, got my first thrills on a motorcycle, was, the back 40 woods behind my house on my, neighbor's little dirt bike, which, I don't know if I was 8 or 9 or 10 at the time, but definitely planted a seed that my goal was to make enough money so I could buy my own motorcycle. And that's why I started saving all my, acorns and pennies to be able to do that. Unfortunately, I never, I had a moped, but I never graduated to a true motorcycle until I went to Harley Davidson. So after going through a number of years without a motorcycle, I found my way into Harley Davidson and bought my first motorcycle and have had one ever since. So kind of a long way around getting a motorcycle, but again, planted the seed early on when I was a youngster.
Well, that's one of the great things about our sport, is there are so many different ways to get into it. But when you talk to people, there's so many similarities in how they discovered their love for riding.
Well, exactly. And I think, not to get too deep right away, but that's the challenge we have in the United States right now, is the motorcycle industry in its current state. My opinion is it's not in a sustainable state, because I look back 20, 30 years, 40 years on how, a lot of people currently riding motorcycles got into it, and it was through a small motorcycle, with a neighbor or in the driveway. Unfortunately, the makeup of the industry in the U.S. right now is 75% heavyweight sales per year. Less than 20% are middleweight, and then a real small percentage are lightweight, which is really an upside-down pyramid. And so what we're focused on at Royal Enfield, and I think what every manufacturer selling in the United States is focused on, is, getting new riders into the sport. And we think Royal Enfield is very well positioned because we are the only motorcycle company in the world solely focused on the middleweight segment, which we define from 250 cc's up to 750 cc's. So we're 100% focused in that space. And, not only do we have some great motorcycles now, but we know we have a really good product plan over the next 3 to 5 years, and we'll be launching, a number of new motorcycles and new motorcycle platforms. So we think, we really want to help grow the United States motorcycling culture and get more numbers into it, and we think we're well positioned, and we know all the other manufacturers are, focused on it, and really we need to work together to grow this sport in the United States.
Absolutely. And anybody that pays attention to the motorcycle press in the last couple of years will know that the trend towards smaller displacement bikes is growing, not just worldwide, of course, but in the United States with the introduction. I mean, all the Japanese brands now have popular models under 500 cc's. KTM, BMW, both now have, or KTM for a long time has, and BMW now has models in the 300 cc displacement range. Harley introduced a 500 cc street bike not long ago. I think a lot more manufacturers are paying attention to that middleweight range. I know when I was growing up, not a lot of my friends had small bikes. Not a lot of my friends had mopeds. And there was kind of a pervasive attitude that, you really wanted to get something that was 750 cc's or bigger. I started with Honda CB 750s. A lot of my friends rode bikes in that same range. But the goal was always to, kind of grow up and get a Harley, or, grow up and get a leader bike of some sort. But that does feel to me to be a kind of uniquely American mindset, because when you look at the motorcycle industry overseas, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of motorcycles come out every year under 500 cc's, and lots of them are under 250 even. So what do you think is it a cultural mindset, or is it just that our choices for so long started with Harley? Harley's an old company, not quite as old as Royal Enfield. But because those big bikes have always been available and kind of the American dream, I'm just curious where you think the mindset developed, and certainly how Royal Enfield can come in to start helping us change our minds to find a lot more appeal in that middleweight range.
Yeah, I think it's a kind of a natural cycle. So if you actually look at the data from the mature motorcycle markets around the world, so obviously United States is one, and Europe you can kind of bundle together as a bunch of countries. But even going to Japan and Australia and other markets, and Japan's actually a more recent one. But when you look at it, if you look at the dynamics of the market over a 50-year period, you see a very similar trend. You see really millions of small motorcycles being sold, and people kind of migrate to larger motorcycles, middleweight, and then ultimately heavyweight. And what happens is it goes from a mode of transportation, more of a utility, to more recreation. And so it's not a unique phenomenon to the United States. It is kind of about mature motorcycle markets. And I think we're going to see similar activity in the emerging markets. So, for example, India currently is the largest two-wheeler market in the world. I think they sell over 17 million motorcycles a year, and 95% of those are 150 cc's and below. But what's really happening is the middleweight segment is exploding because people are beginning to migrate to a larger motorcycle, and also beginning to get into recreational motorcycling. So I think we kind of know what the trends are going to be. I think the challenge we have in the mature markets is how do we, reinvent the smaller space, which I think people are really welcoming and accepting now. So it's kind of almost a resurgence in the mature markets as we kind of see the emerging markets kind of go through a normal, natural cycle.
Right. Yeah. And another thing that I'm kind of curious about, and you're uniquely positioned to kind of answer this or address it, but and I know you've only been with Royal Enfield for a few years, and you were with Harley for a long time. But I'm curious how you managed the transition from, working for a big American company to working for a big Indian company. A lot of Americans don't really know too much about India. We don't know too much about Indian culture. Certainly, we don't know about Indian corporate culture. But I'm curious how you found, or what the differences in kind of that corporate life was between working for Harley and working for Royal Enfield.
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, I'm not sure how much of it is the culture of India versus the culture of a small company that is getting large very quickly. So, in some respects, when I came to Harley-Davidson, or went to Harley-Davidson in 1993, it feels very similar to when I came to Royal Enfield a few years ago. The company was on the verge of an inflection point and really experiencing rapid growth. So Harley-Davidson obviously almost went out of business in the 80s and
right.
into the 90s in a real, kind of robust 20-year continuous growth mode. And so I got to ride, most, 15 or almost 20 of those years. So, and it really was a small operation, small company that got large rather quickly. So I see very similar experience at Royal Enfield. A lot of similarities, development of just the basic processes and systems weren't there. Royal Enfield has really exploded in growth, even faster than Harley-Davidson. Royal Enfield went from producing and selling 40,000 motorcycles in 2010 to over 850,000 motorcycles this year. So, that kind of explosive growth required a lot of changes with the company.
Certainly.
And with the culture. And so the company has added a tremendous amount of talent, both capabilities and capacity in the people side. They've formally, put organizational structure into place, and they're putting processes and systems into place. So it's changing so rapidly. I see changes every, time I go to India, which is about once a quarter. So it's a real fascinating, high-paced, rapid growth, dynamic environment to be a part of. But again, I saw a lot of those very similar things at Harley-Davidson in the 90s. What is different? Yeah, there's a little bit of a corporate culture difference from, a U.S.-based company versus an India-based company. But, I think it all depends on the person. I actually kind of enjoy that difference and kind of learning. So when I came on board, I really, viewed my initial role twofold. One was leading North America for Royal Enfield, kind of reintroducing the brand and putting a strategy in place and a team and implementing. And then secondarily was, helping Royal Enfield become a global company. And I think now, that role is kind of diminished because they're there. They've hired a tremendous amount of talent, global talent. They've opened up a technology center in the UK where they have over 125 employees. They've opened up a wholly owned subsidiary in Brazil, and they're in the process of opening up another wholly owned subsidiary office in Jakarta, Indonesia. So, they're growing very rapidly.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
And I'm just excited to be a part of it. It's a lot of fun.
Well, I think it's kind of interesting. I don't want to say ironic, but I think it's very interesting that they've opened up a technology center, that they've opened up anything in England, considering that Royal Enfield started as an English brand and migrated to India, where it became iconic.
Yes. And I think is brilliant. And it wasn't done, randomly. I think it was done very strategically and deliberately. And that's where Siddhartha Lal, who's our CEO of Royal Enfield, he's also kind of CEO, chairman of Eicher Motors Limited, which is the parent company, the public company in India.
Right.
But he's been involved with Royal Enfield since the late 90s, and it's his baby. I mean, he really is really excited about Royal Enfield. He's a true motorcyclist, and he's an incredible strategic thought leader. So a lot of what you're seeing right now with Royal Enfield has been in the development of his, strategy and his mind for a couple of decades.
Well, sir,
and now the company has the resources and the money to really invest in growing this company and becoming a global entity and a global brand. And so now he's executing, again, some of these strategies that were developed, decades ago. So it's been fascinating to work for Siddhartha and to kind of see how he views things in decades. So the beauty of it is he doesn't look at things like a typical public company or Wall Street company, quarter to quarter. He's looking out decades. So when he hired me for the United States, he specifically said, hey, this is a 10 to 20 to 30-year investment. We believe North America, specifically the United States, is a very influential motorcycle market. It's not huge, but it's very influencing, meaning it has a trickle-down effect in markets all over the world. So we want to be a leader in the middleweight segment in the United States because we know it'll have an impact around the world. And that's what we're doing, and that's what's exciting about this opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So, excuse me, I got a little bit of a frog in my throat today. My personal experience with Royal Enfield goes back maybe 10 years when a buddy of mine got one. At the time he did that, he was the only person I knew in all of my motorcycling friends that had a Royal Enfield. It was super easy to work on. It was cool looking and retro looking, but it was a little bit tough to get parts. There weren't very many dealers. So part of Royal Enfield's push in the United States is going to necessarily have to involve an expanding dealer base to provide that support that riders rely on to get parts and service and just information and to build the community. We kind of flock around our dealers as our community center. So how are you able to kind of guide that developing dealer base in the United States to promote not just the technical aspects of motorcycle ownership, but the social aspects as well?
Well, and absolutely. And that's really been our focus, for the first couple years. So we officially took over the U.S. market and Canadian markets from independent distributors. So
okay.
There was a dealer network and, there are customers in place. And so we took over officially January 1st of 2016, so just about 2 years ago. So officially on that day, we had 0 dealers because all Royal Enfield dealers had their dealer agreement through the independent distributor, which their agreement was terminated at that point. So our number one focus was really, again, what we call phase 1 of our business plan, was establishing the processes and systems to do business with our parent company in India. So making sure we can ship product and, have a warranty, a 2-year warranty in the United States, all of those things, while developing and creating a very solid dealer network across the United States and Canada at the time. And so that was our number one focus. We have, over 75 dealers operational now across the U.S., Canada. We have one in Mexico and one in Puerto Rico. So we've really expanded the dealer network. We're not where we need to be. We initially targeted the top 100 metro areas, and we're focused on getting the best dealer that we can in every metro area. And that has resulted primarily in multi-brand outlets. So it's a dealer that may already carry 2, 3, 4 motorcycle brands,
Sure.
and then they add the Royal Enfield brand. And that makes sense from an economic and a feasibility standpoint because, our volumes are low and our prices are low. So financially, that's really how we have to get into the dealer network.
Well, and it makes sense because then you have a network of experienced motorcycle industry people that have experienced technicians working for them already. So instead of training people up from scratch to work just one mark, you've got this established system. They've got existing customers who have, cousins, nephews, kids, parents, and they come in and they go, yeah, well, a BMW or a Harley Davidson or a KTM isn't for me. But look at that Royal Enfield over there. It's a little smaller displacement. It's a little shorter, if you're a shorter person, lower inseam challenged, let's call it. It's a single cylinder or a 2-cylinder bike. It's a little easier to maintain, that kind of thing. It's you can't buy it if you don't see it. So having a multi-line dealership puts it on the floor, puts it in front of people. They start thinking about it. Sooner or later, they want to try one. They want to buy one. So that makes sense. And the 2 dealers that I know personally are both multi-line dealers in the Washington, D.C. area. So, yeah, that model I think is going to work pretty good for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's working well, and we're getting great dealers and, continuing to expand that. And we'll continue. That'll be an ongoing thing. But, we expect over the next year or so, we'll, reach about 100 dealers, but we don't think we'll be done at that point. We really have to identify, the open metro areas as well as the spaces in between and make sure we have what we consider kind of an appropriate density of dealers across the region.
Right.
So that a potential customer or a customer, has access. It may be a 25 to 15 mile commute, but they can go to a dealer, they can get service, and we believe that's kind of the first phase. After that, we'll get creative and work with the dealer network to figure out how to make it easier to use and better service, whether that be mobile service or whatever. The focus is about the customer and making sure that every touch point with the brand is exceptional and basically meeting the customer on their terms. But the first phase is all about the dealer network.
Yeah, and I think you guys are doing well on that. You said you have more than 75 dealers right now, and I think the last time I looked at your dealer numbers, you were almost to 60, and that was just a few months ago. So that's certainly a positive growth, and it's a good indicator that you guys are taking it very seriously.
Yeah, the conversation I had with Siddhartha when he hired me was, this is a long-term investment, so let's do it right. Let's not just focus on doing it quickly. And so, we're working to make sure we get the best dealers. We're doing the training. To answer the previous question, we're also investing appropriate resources. So we have a warehouse just outside of Dallas-Fort Worth where all of the motorcycles that are produced in India come into. And we do a central pre-delivery inspection, or PDI. Every other manufacturer has their dealers do a PDI. What we found is by doing a central PDI, it reduces variation and in the process as well as in the result. And the resulting improvement in quality was exceptional. So we actually reduced PDI warranty claims by over 90% over the past 2 years. So that, to us, is very important because it's about the customer and the dealer getting a world-class quality product. That also with the warehouse of spare parts. So we've invested over $1 million in having appropriate spare parts so that if the dealer doesn't have the part, hopefully, within 2 days or even next day, we can get the part to them. So we've invested in the parts. We've invested in quality up front. and we've invested in training. So we have a training center at the Dallas warehouse. We also have a training center at our headquarters in Milwaukee to train the dealers, mechanics, and technicians on servicing and appropriately maintaining our motorcycles. So, yeah, we're putting a lot of resources in the foundational elements of the business. And really, for the first 2 years, that's really what we've been focused on, almost exclusively. And, we'll get into it. But now that we're introducing new motorcycles, we get into kind of what we'd call the front side of the business and really developing the brand and the excitement around new motorcycles so that we can get more brand awareness and more customers.
Well, that's a great segue into what I wanted to start talking about, which is, of course, the motorcycles that Royal Enfield is putting out. The Himalayan is the new adventure-oriented bike, for lack of a better term. I mean, that's a genre now, so we can call it what it is. And certainly that's a growing market at the adventure bikes. But, we don't really see a lot of middleweight adventure bikes. There's some 650cc models, but the Himalayan's coming in a little bit under 500 cc's, correct?
Right, it's 410 cc's.
There we go, and it's just coming out now. So tell me a little bit about how that bike fits into kind of the American concept of adventure motorcycling.
So the funny story is, and I'll try to keep it short, is that it was not intended for the U.S. market. It was conceived, designed, developed, and built for India. Starting probably 6-8 years ago was when it was conceived. And it was really about, Royal Enfield has a very rich history going back to 1955 in India. And as soon as they got the first, Royal Enfield bullet motorcycle there, they started using them in the military and going up into the Himalayan mountains.
Absolutely.
And so there's been a real rich history of Royal Enfield, going through the Himalayan mountains. And so the CEO and the leadership team, quite a few years ago said, you know what, we need to build a purpose-built, purpose-designed motorcycle, specifically Royal Enfield, for traversing the Himalayas. And rather than make one that dominates the mountains, because the mountains are a very spiritual part of Indian culture and geography. And they said, let's get one that uses the energy of the Himalayan mountains and the spirit of it and actually flows with the mountains. So that's why they came up with one that we would call, a middle-sized motorcycle. They didn't need, a big motorcycle to dominate the mountains. They wanted to work with the mountains. And so to hear them talk about it is really interesting and provides a lot of insight. So that's ultimately how the motorcycle is conceptualized. When I first joined Royal Enfield 3.5 years ago and took my first trip to India for Royal Enfield, I saw in the design studio, the designer clay sculpting the Himalayan, and I looked at it and I said, that's a great motorcycle. We need it in the United States. And Siddhartha Lal said, well, that's great, but it's not coming because that motorcycle is really for India. And I said, trust me, that'll sell in the United States. And he said, no way, that's the land of extreme motorcycles. We know what the adventure touring segment looks like because we studied it, and this doesn't fit. And I said, you're right, it can create a whole new subcategory. And so he basically said, prove it. So I said, okay. So they gave me two, once it was launched about 2 years ago, they gave me 2 Himalayan motorcycles we brought over here. We had over 75 people ride it, some customers, some dealers, some motorcycle media, some brand ambassadors, and obviously our employees. And we did a very thorough survey and compiled the results and then did a kind of a business case and took it over to India and got it approved because of really the 75 people that rode it all absolutely said, this is a fabulous motorcycle. We need something like that in the United States. So we got the business case approved, but then the challenge was to get the motorcycle, so it would work in the United States and be able to be homologated and meet the emissions requirements, because the motorcycle at that time was a carbureted model, And so all of the product development folks were already working on the twin and other projects, so it's taken a while, but we're pleased to say that we've got it fully homologated and it meets all emissions and regulatory requirements. And, we did the big official launch with the motorcycle press last week and our dealer network down in Texas. And in April, we will begin selling it through our dealer network. So we couldn't be more excited because we truly believe this motorcycle fits with Royal Enfield. Because what we are about and how we're positioning it in North America is we're really about what we call the return to pure motorcycling. And what that means is it's about incredibly fun, accessible, and affordable motorcycles back to what motorcycling used to be in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. That's how and when we learned. And we believe it's exactly what the market needs right now. So we couldn't be more excited about introducing the Himalayan this selling season into the United States and Canada.
Well, you're doing it at a good time, too, going into everybody that's trying to sell a motorcycle knows you start trying to sell it at the beginning of spring, not the middle of fall, because that's when you're going to get the most eyes on it and you're going to get the most attention because everybody's thinking about it's almost summer, I got to start riding. And I think what Royal Enfield is doing by focusing on, major metropolitan markets and by bringing what I would consider very reasonably priced motorcycles into the country, I think you really have a good shot at not just getting the interest of people who already ride, but people who are thinking about getting into riding and want to get, without sounding pejorative, they want to get a real motorcycle. They can walk into a showroom and look at Royal Enfields and they see real motorcycles that are new and have, fuel injection and disc brakes, but they're still, $5,000 or less.
Right. No, you're exactly right. So, it's a great segue because our plan for this year, as we go from what I would call focused on the back end of the business to focused on the front end of the business going forward, our plan is really two-pronged approach. One is, again, existing motorcyclists, and, we know what events we have to be at and all of that. That's all fairly straightforward. But the other prong or focus point is really about getting new riders into the sport and specifically into Royal Enfield. And so we have a number of activities, and one is as simple as the last 2 years we've been working at getting our motorcycles into rider training schools. And we have about 50 of the motorcycles in rider training schools today, and we believe that's a continuing opportunity for us because the rider training schools really like to have one of our motorcycles in their training schools. So toward the, some riders feel comfortable right from day one, but others towards the end of their training sessions and before they get their permit, they really want to be able to ride a larger motorcycle, a real motorcycle, and to do it in the confines of a safety training school in a parking lot to start, and then they can get on the road with a reasonable sized motorcycle that really builds their confidence. And in our mind, could also then be, the first motorcycle they actually buy. So it's working out very well. And we have a number of other activities that are specifically focused on attracting new people into motorcycling in the United States.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And, the poor millennials get blamed for a lot of stuff involving our economy and especially our industry. But I think that, Royal Enfield is certainly... they're kind of meeting that retro aesthetic without pandering is kind of I'm trying not to sound negative because I don't want people to think I'm criticizing anybody that builds a retro looking bike, but retro bikes sell, but we want new technology. We want fuel injection. We want, reliability. We want emissions compliance and things like that. So how do you think Royal Enfield is kind of balancing that historical aesthetic with the modern technology? How do you think they're managing that process?
Well, I think it is a balance, and I think initially, again, everyone looks at Royal Enfield as being kind of a classic, motorcycle company. But the beauty of it is we know and believe we can be so much more. So the Himalayan is a great example. While it has a lot of heritage, especially in India from the Himalayan mountain, it's a brand new motorcycle, a brand new segment that really, Royal Enfield's never been involved in, but it works. And so with the appropriate technology that we need to provide what the customers want. So yes, it has fuel injection. It's got the right instrument cluster. Even a compass, a digital compass on there.
Cool.
And I think that's what you'll see going forward is that we will, integrate appropriate technology. We probably won't be bleeding edge in technology, but we don't need to, and that's not how we're positioning the brand. But we do need to be appropriate technology, and we'll have to work very closely with the customers, both new, like millennials, as well as existing riders and customers, to make sure we get that balance. But the beauty of it is, we provide, a few classic style motorcycles right now. We're introducing the Himalayan, and over the next 3 to 5 years, we'll launch, over a dozen new motorcycles. Some will be very classically styled, and some will be, maybe new and innovative. And we believe that we as a brand can, be both. And because the focus is going to be about middleweight and about, fun, accessible, affordable motorcycles that have a lot of character. And we think we'll continue to do that.
Well, and there's certainly a model for that, that success. If you look at Triumph, when they came back, when they made their big comeback, not in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't too terribly long ago, but in the motorcycle world, it's been a generation. They purposely ignored the heritage of the Bonneville for several model years, and they ran things like the Sprint and the Speed Triple, and they came out with modern bikes, and then they introduced the Bonneville line again. And now, you go to a motorcycle event and you see guys on Triumphs that are, adventure bikes and touring bikes and sport touring bikes, but you also see the guys on the Bobbers and the Scramblers and the Bonnevilles, and they're modifying their bikes just like they used to do, back in the 60s and 70s and all that kind of stuff. And I think that Royal Enfield has a good opportunity to kind of, I don't want to say follow that model, but that's a good precedent to see that you can do the old style, but you can also do the forward looking as well. So, I really have a lot of good expectations for Royal Enfield, and I really hope that the dealer network takes off and that people start paying a lot of attention, because I just love cool motorcycles, and Royal Enfields are cool motorcycles. Yeah, I dig that the Himalayan looks like a Royal Enfield, but it doesn't look retro. It has that good modern, kind of aggressive adventure bike look that I think is going to do well in the American market. It's more utilitarian for the Indian market. They weren't necessarily thinking of that when they were coming up with it, but sometimes form follows function. And when you create a bike for more aggressive terrain, you kind of create a more aggressive look, because it just kind of needs to be able to do different things.
Yep. No, absolutely. And again, I think that's really our approach looking forward. Again, the beauty of it is outside of India, we, kind of have almost a blank canvas or a clean sheet of paper. And we're very deliberately and very specifically positioning the brand to be a very inclusive brand. Not that we can be all things to all people, but we definitely want the brand and the experience and the lifestyle surrounding the brand to be very appealing to whether it's a 75-year-old vintage guy who used to own an Interceptor in the 60s to a millennial, or even the next generation coming up. My 16-year-old daughter, we went to flat out Friday, indoor flat track racing, and she got the bug. She's like, "Wow, I want to ride a motorcycle." So, I'm getting a Himalayan this summer, and we've got some acreage, so we have a trail, and she'll be learning how to ride that motorcycle. So again, I think the beauty of our brand is it can appeal to a very broad spectrum of current riders and future riders.
Well, and to that end, where can people go to get more information about Royal Enfield, and especially to find out where your dealers are?
Yeah, so we have a website. It's royalenfield.com. I think it's /USA. So, but it's got a dealer finder on there, and it will show you the closest dealers to you, and that continues to be updated. And we're adding 2 to 3 new dealers every month. So, lots of great information, history and culture, as well as kind of the products are spec'd out on there as well. And the good news is there's a lot of third-party resources. We have bloggers and other people who've been, ambassadors of the brand for, over a decade or 2 in the United States. And they do an amazing job of continuing to develop and grow and broaden the Royal Enfield community in North America. So that's what it's all about. We don't want to own it and control it. We want to help facilitate it and create an ecosystem and a community for Royal Enfield, because, really the riders and the people own the brand, and we can kind of help direct it and facilitate it. And to me, that's the way it should be. And so we're very excited about continuing to evolve this and grow it as we go forward.
Excellent. And I'll post links for the website in the show notes, so that people that go to the website can go to my website can very easily get to those links and do that. And I'm gonna, just before we go, I'm gonna encourage everybody to dig up their local Royal Enfield dealer. Go check out the bikes. We've been talking a lot about the Himalayan with Rod today, but there are, I can think of a half a dozen other bikes, single cylinder, twin cylinder, standards, cafe racer style. There's a lot to look at when it comes to Royal Enfield. Even though for a lot of people, Royal Enfield is just getting started, you guys come with this not only a rich history, but a very deep catalog of successful motorcycles. So that's very exciting to look at.
Yeah, definitely. We encourage people to, do some research, go to our dealers. Again, the dealers will have no less than 3 or 4 different models that are brand new and all come with a 2-year unlimited warranty. So, there's a lot of perceptions and history, and all I can tell you is, we're making history, but we're also evolving and rapidly improving perceptions of quality and function as we speak with the existing products and obviously the new products. So all of our dealers have motorcycles for display, but they also have at least 1, if not 2 or more motorcycles for test purposes. So we encourage all potential customers to go and ask the dealer to take a ride on a Royal Enfield, and we think you'll be impressed and surprised, and hopefully lead to the purchase of another motorcycle.
Well, there you go. Thanks, Rod. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be on the show, and I look forward to trying out a Royal Enfield on my own.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Rod and I didn't get too much into the technical details of the Himalayan, so here's some numbers for anybody interested in checking out this middleweight adventure bike. For your MSRP of $4,499, you can get the bike in 2 colors, gray or white, which they call granite or snow, and Royal Enfield's first ever monoshock rear suspension. There's over 8.5 inches of ground clearance, and the bike sports a 21-inch front wheel and a 17-incher in the back. The exhaust and intake are high, so water crossings shouldn't be a problem. The single-cylinder overhead cam 4-stroke engine displaces 411 cc's and is designed more for torque than outright horsepower. Royal Enfield claims just 25 horsepower at 6,500 RPM, but 24 foot-pounds of torque at just over 4,200 RPM. There's a 5-speed transmission and a wet clutch to go along with push-button start, digital ignition, and electronic fuel injection. Check out the show notes for a link to a full review written by my friend Carl Parker, who's the editor of ADV Moto magazine. Because this podcast is produced by the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America, in every episode I highlight one benefit of being a member. I admit it's an enticement to get you over to our website and get you to join for at least 1 year. I've been a member since 1999 and have used the member benefits to my advantage countless times since then, especially the roadside assistance program. But that's not what I'm going to tell you about today. Today, it's all about the MOA Foundation's raffle bike, a fully restored 1974 R90S. In 1974, BMW said, quote, "Tomorrow has arrived," when it talked about the R90S. Chris Canterbury of Boxer Metal meticulously restored a first-year R90S for the Foundation giveaway. Raffle tickets are $25 each, or you can get 5 for $100. Proceeds from the raffle go to the MOA Foundation and support its mission of promoting motorcycle rider safety, education, and training. The drawing will be held on the 21st of April, 2018, and you do not have to be an MOA member to win this motorcycle, nor do you have to be present at the drawing to win. If you win, a Foundation representative will call you to let you know how you can get a hold of your restored R90S. To get more information, check out the website at bmwmoa.org/foundation raffle. Thank you for coming back for the 17th episode of Chasing the Horizon, which featured a discussion with Rod Copes, the president of Royal Enfield USA. Our next episode will feature a discussion with Court Butler, the founder of Butler Maps. That episode will be out on April 2nd. Andrew Finberg composed and recorded our theme music. Karen Halker designed our logo. Thanks again to all our guests and listeners for giving us their time. We'll see you out there somewhere on the road, or off it. Ride safe.